In this video, we are going to see the new features that PHP 8.0 is going to offer for us. In a previous video, we have seen the backward and compatible changes that have been introduced in PHP 8.0 starting from PHP 7.4. If you are interested in those backward and compatible changes, feel free to check the video out. It will be available in the description below and in the suggestion area somewhere in this video. I have prepared a Docker Compose file where I can run two versions of PHP. The first version is PHP 7.4 through PHP 74 service, and the second version is PHP 8.0 through PHP 80 service. Down here I have two terminals. On the left hand side I'm going to run PHP version 7.4 with this command over here, docker compose exec PHP 74 bash. Then I'm going to cd to PHP 7.4 src and new features, the folder new features. If I do php-v there, I'm going to see 7.4. Now I'm going to do the same thing for PHP 80, so I'm going to cd PHP 8.0 src and then nf, and there I'm going to do php-v. I'll be seeing PHP 8.0. Now that I have everything set up, let's check out our first new feature of PHP 8.0, which is named arguments. This setCookie function call is a little bit challenging to do. Why? Because each time I have to call this function, I need to see the documentation of setCookie in order for me to get the call in the right way. This function takes a lot of arguments. It has one required argument, which is the cookie name, and then a lot of optional arguments. Reading this call is also challenging. Why? Because again, this function has a lot of arguments, and making sense of this 0, for example, and those two true is a little bit challenging because we don't know those values stands for what. And we have to look up the documentation to make sense of this function call. So this have been changed in PHP 8.0. Let me open the function signature and the function call on the same screen. So this have been changed in PHP 8.0 with the named arguments. Named arguments consist simply of putting the argument name followed by a colon, then the argument value when calling a function. So here for setCookie, for example, I am providing a value for the argument name, which is over here, the required argument. Then for the value, I'm providing this value over here, which is this job, and so on and so forth. This new feature has three main advantages. The first obvious one and most important for me is that this code is way more readable than the first version over here. We know at least each argument stands for what, especially for those abstract values like true over here. The second advantage is that we don't have to provide default values. Here in the first call, we were obliged to provide this 0 over here, which is the value of expires or option. Why? Because we want a path value different from this default value over here. So we were obliged to give this 0 over here in order for us to provide a different path value. Here we no more have to do that. And the last advantage is that we don't have to provide the exact order of arguments. Here if we see the setCookie, the first argument is the name of the cookie, which I can reverse over here. I can provide value before the name, and this script will work, although I will be getting a small warning about reversed argument order, but nonetheless my script will still be working. Note that I can mix between the old way of calling arguments, which is called positional arguments, those two over here, and named arguments, those 5 over here, in a condition that I provide the position arguments before the named arguments. So this call over here is okay, but this call over here, where I am providing named arguments before the positional arguments, is not going to work, and I'm going to have an error saying that I should be providing positional arguments before the named arguments. That's for the first feature, which is named arguments. Now we are going to move to the second feature, which is attributes. According to PHP official docs, attributes offer the ability to add structured, machine-readable metadata information on declarations in code. If you are a PHP developer, you for sure has used annotations. Annotations did exactly the same job, but they were community driven, so they were not part of official PHP, and now attributes will came to officially replace those annotations. Let's take as example this Symfony code. Here we are defining a controller, security controller, and within this controller we have this piece of code, which is a function called login action. We have this annotation over here that provides metadata about this function over here, which basically says that we are going to execute this function once we have the /login path in our browser, and this route will be named login action. The same thing could be achieved now with PHP attributes using this syntax over here. Our attribute will start with this notation over here, then we are going to have root, and for this root we are going to provide two values. The first is the path and the second is the name of our root. If you have hard time reading the syntax of attributes, the RFC proposal does an excellent job of explaining how we could read these attributes. It says semantically the attribute declaration should be read as instantiating a class with the attribute name and passing arguments to the constructor. So we should be looking to this as a class name. We'll be having a class named root, and then all this call will be like calling a constructor, providing two properties to our class. The first one will be the path itself, and the second one will be the name of the root. So that's for attributes. Now we are going to see the third feature, which is constructor promotion. Here I have a point class that has two properties of type integer, x and y. To be able to initialize those two properties, I am providing a constructor with two parameters, x and y, and within the body of the constructor I'm going to assign x and y to my local properties x and y. This is a classic example of initializing properties with the constructor. Now this code gets repeated a lot of times. In PHP 8.0, this code will be simplified to this single line over here. So instead of defining two properties and then within the body of the constructor assigning the parameters to the properties, we simply take the modifier of our property, which is protected, and put it in the constructor itself. So PHP now will understand that we are going to have a property named x of type integer and it will be protected. This is the same case for the second property, which is y. Our code will be more clean and we are going to be way more productive with this awesome new feature. The change number 4 is concerning union types. In PHP 7 we had this new feature of typing parameters and return type of functions with a single type. While it was an interesting feature, it has a small drawback that we cannot type a, for example, with multiple types. So my sum function will be working only with integers. If I want to write a sum function that will be summing integers or floats, one of them, I will be having problem doing that in PHP 7. Now in PHP 8, this has been fixed with union types. I can now write my sum function that will be taking either float or integer. So a is either a float or integer, or in other words, a is typed as union type between float and integer. The same goes for b and for the return type of my function. The fifth change is actually an operator called the match operator. This operator will be matching the content of a variable, food in our case, against possible values. If the content of this variable will be matching one of the items provided in the match body, we are going to return the corresponding return statement. So if my food contains cake, which is the case over here, we are going to return this food is cake, and this string will be contained in this variable over here, return value. Although this match statement looks a lot like switch case statement, there is differences between the two. I have summarized the differences in this table over here. Match operator will be comparing items in a strict way, whereas switch statement will be comparing them in a loose way. Match operator will be returning value, but switch case is not going to return value. Match will not fall through to a later cases. Switch case will do that, and that's why we have the break statements. Match statement is exhaustive, meaning that if no value is matched, we are going to have an exception raised. This is not the case for switch case. To demonstrate the exhaustiveness, I'm going to modify my food variable into no food, for example, and try this code in PHP version 8. So if I execute this script over here, I'm going to have an error saying uncaught, unhandled match error. Why? Because there is no match found for this no food value. So we have two possibilities: either list all the possible values for food within the match block, or add a try catch block to this match statement. The change number 6 is a new operator called null safe property and method operator. This operator consists of adding interrogation point at the end of a variable if this variable can be nullable. Also at the end of a function if the return type of this function could be nullable. We know that we cannot call functions and call properties on null value. That's why this operator is very useful. So this line over here, this PHP 8.0 line over here, is equivalent to all this code over here. So thanks to this operator, we are avoiding a lot of checks for nothing. Let's go step by step to explain what this code is doing. So basically this code is checking the variable repository. If it is null, result will be null. Then if repository is not null, we are going to get the return type of getUser function. If this getUser is returning null, then result will be null. Otherwise, we are going to have the property name of the return type of this getUser function. So this new operator is a lifesaver to avoid writing a lot of code. The 7th change is the introduction of a new value error exception that will be raised when we have the correct type but not the correct value. In PHP 7, a call to strpose, range and array rand, for example, with arguments that are correctly typed but their value are not correct, will be simply issuing a warning, but the execution of the script will not be stopped. This will no longer be the case in PHP 8. If you are passing the correct type but the wrong value, we are going to have a value error exception. Let's try that out. I'm going to execute this script over here with PHP 7 and let's see what we are going to have. So I'm going to have 3 warnings for strpose, range and array rand because I am passing values that are not good but they are correctly typed. So my script is issuing warnings but it is not stopped. In PHP 8, if I execute the exact same script, I'm going to have a fatal error for my first call for strpose. Why? Because argument 3 offset does not have the good value, although it has the right type. So we have to be extra careful to PHP internal calls that used to raise a warning for incorrect values that are passed although they have the correct type. The last change is concerning the new mixed pseudo type. Mixed pseudo type is equivalent to the union of all possible PHP types, which are string, integer, float, boolean, null, array, object callable, and resource. I can type hint my properties with mixed, I can type my arguments with mixed, and I can also declare my function return type as mixed. As of PHP 8.0, mixed is assumed when no type is declared, so my person argument over here is assumed of type mixed, and mixed union void is assumed when no return type is declared. So my greet function over here will be returning the union of mixed and void. That's it for this video. I will be asking questions to help you stick some information that we have seen together in this small video. Feel free to answer them in the comments section and see you in other videos to come.